In the main event of UFC Houston, Strickland gets the TKO stoppage on strikes over Anthony Hernandez in the third round. And now we are left wondering, after what was a great performance, one of his best for sure, is he now the front runner for Chimaev? Well, I'm going to break down what needs to happen with the next middleweight title fight. What does Strickland's win over Hernandez mean in the end? And where is this division headed? And if you're new here, please drop a sub to the channel and help us grow this year. And I really do appreciate it. So we can start with the fight and how I think this performance by Strickland is one of his best. But value-wise, at this moment, I don't think it's enough to get him over Amavov for the next title shot. Now, that doesn't mean Amavov has the better chance at beating Chimaev than Strickland, but I do think when you lay it all out, Amavov should be fighting for the title. And not that Fluffy isn't a good win for Strickland either. I think it is going to age well, but I said in the preview to this fight that I don't think Fluffy is a real title contender. Now, with a win over Strickland, then there would have been no doubt, but he didn't look to be on the same level as Strickland. He also didn't look to be in the right division next to Strickland. Strickland looked huge in there with Hernandez, and Hernandez has fought bigger guys than him and came out on top. But when you start to reach those truly elite of the elite middleweights, you're going to need to match up in size too. If you want to get takedowns and control them on the ground, you need to have some size on you. And Hernandez, like I said, he looks like a welterweight next to Strickland, and he probably is a true welterweight. If you look at his physique, he could probably get lean enough and be a welterweight. So performance-wise, it's one of Strickland's best, but some of that falls on Hernandez. Not to take credit away from Strickland, but it is true. Hernandez just never got going. He never looked to be the threat he looked to be through his 8-fight win streak. He actually looked human. And yes, this is where you can give Strickland his credit and say, well, it's because Strickland's so good and he's a former champ. Strickland just shut him down. Yes, all that is true, but we all knew Strickland was not coming with a different style. And yeah, you can't just change your style this far along in your career, especially at the level he's at, but why did it feel like Hernandez had nothing for Strickland, despite knowing exactly what was coming? It got to the point where he got sloppy trying to make something happen, and Strickland made him pay for that, as he should. I think it's because, like I said, Hernandez, he's not a real title contender like Strickland, and that means he's not beating DDP. He'll probably get schooled by Amavov, and against Chimaev, he might get destroyed. So Hernandez, he's not that old, but he's also not that young either. He's at that prime age. He's 32, and he said post-fight he needs to go back to the drawing board. And maybe he should. Maybe adjust his style a bit, maybe add to it. Because he's at that point in his career where he might not want to change too much, but I think some change is needed there. Or maybe this is where the line is drawn for Hernandez at middleweight. Anything further than Brendan Allen, he's going to fall short. Maybe. Because I don't think going down to welterweight would be the best idea, because that division, it's already stacked. It's probably the most stacked division right now. So maybe a body recomposition, maybe that's what's needed for Hernandez. But back to what I was saying about Strickland and the title shot. I know Strickland beat Amavov, and Amavov is supposed to be the front runner for Chimaev's next fight, but let's not forget that that fight was at 205. And sure, both guys have that added benefit of not cutting more weight, but it was less than a week's notice. So let's see what happens at middleweight before we go and say, oh, Strickland already beat Amavov. Well, they are 185ers. They're not 205ers. They are middleweight fighters. So let's focus on what they've done at middleweight lately, because I should also mention that that fight, it was already 3 years ago. Since then, Amavov, he's on a 5-fight win streak. And Strickland, he's just getting back on track after a title fight loss to DDP. So looking back at the past 5 fights for both, for Amavov, he beat Roman Dolidze, majority decision. He finished Cannonier on strikes, beat Brendan Allen, unanimous decision, finished Israel Adesanya on strikes, and he beat Kyle Barrio, a unanimous decision, a real masterclass of him too. And for Strickland, he beat Israel Adesanya to win the belt. Probably the best performance of his career if you don't consider this last one against Hernandez to be. And then he went on to lose to DDP by split decision. And that was a true split decision. But after that, then he went to barely beat Paulo Costa in a split decision, which I'll say it probably should have been a unanimous, but Paulo, he's levels below Strickland. So make what you will of that win. And then he rematches DDP and lost unanimously. And then, of course, he finishes Anthony Hernandez on strikes. So you might highlight, hey, Strickland was a former champ. He's won the belt. But in those 5 fights, he lost 2 title fights and he beat Paulo Costa, who is about as valuable as an Anthony Hernandez win. So if we were to do the same thing to Imavov's last 5 and kind of dissect it to say, hey, this isn't as good as you make it out to be, you can't really do that as good as Strickland's. He didn't win any split decisions. I'm talking about Imavov here. He finished 2 fights where one was a former champion, Israel Adesanya, someone that Strickland couldn't finish in their fight. And again, 5-fight win streak. You can downplay the Delice win because he is kind of trash, but Cannonier, yeah, he might be old, but that's still a solid win. Brendan Allen, well, I'm still kind of iffy about Allen as a real title contender, but we'll see if DDP and Allen actually match up and see if Allen can prove me wrong. And then Kyle Barrio, that's a pretty solid win, man. He's real clean. He doesn't make any mistakes. And honestly, the way Imavov beat him, that was impressive. He made Kyle look like he was overhyped, and I don't think Kyle is. I think he could actually get in a top 3 spot, but we'll see about him. He fights RDR in like 2 weeks. So overall, I just think Imavov has put together the type of wins that will make you the most deserving of a title shot, especially when compared to Strickland. Now, even though I think Imavov is still the guy up next, will the UFC give it to him? Because despite what many of us think, that doesn't mean that's what the UFC would do. We know the UFC has their plans for what they want to see, so I can't lie to you and say Strickland and Imavov aren't in that same space where you could throw either for a title. If the UFC really wanted to, they could throw Strickland in there. I also said this in the preview. I don't know if the UFC will want Strickland as champ again. Just after the fight, they were cutting Strickland's mic off at the post-fight interview, and I don't know if that's pressure coming from Paramount or maybe the UFC is finally done with letting him loose, just free to say whatever he wants. But at the same time, there is a shortage of top American fighters, or at the very least, at the minimum, of what the UFC would probably like at any one time. So he does have that going for him. And as far as him actually standing a chance against Chimaev, I do think he's the better fight. When you look back at the DDP fight, Chimaev, he just laid on DDP for 25 minutes. And I just don't see that happening with Strickland. I can see that happening with Imavov. Imavov's been taken down and held down a bunch of times. I can't say he would stand a better chance against Chimaev than Strickland. And there's more of a story to Strickland and Chimaev. They have some history of training together and going back and forth about what happened in the gym, claiming that, they got the best of one another. And things are starting to get more chippy. So while Imavov is just there so deserving of the title shot, not making the needle move, Sean is just effortlessly building up the Chimaev fight. And Imavov is talking shit to Strickland like, okay, let's forget about the title. How about I fight you instead? That shit doesn't make any sense. Imavov might just talk himself out of the title shot in that case. So with what we can see, with how the UFC has been moving, you got to move the needle or else you might get passed up, even if you are on a nice win streak and looking like the best contender. The UFC will do it again. We will see the UFC do another Volk Lopez 2, another Gaethje versus Patty. It will happen. So in the end, Hernandez got checked, not like fraud check, but maybe he was pushed a little too quick. Mavov is the more deserving, but Strickland is talking his way to the title at the moment. So who knows who gets the title shot next? It could be either of these guys. So let me know what you think down in the comments. Let me know who you think should fight for that title next, and drop a sub to the channel. If you like this video, check some of my other videos out. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.